All right, for my second video on the subjunctive mood, we have now the imperfect subjunctive. So we just saw that the pluperfect subjunctive in Latin, a verb form, will have ISSE, and the translation in English will always be had. And when you put that with the Latin word cum at the beginning of the clause, it makes cum no longer mean with, it now means when. With an imperfect subjunctive, much of the same happens, with the verb form is going to look a little different. So when you have ARE, ERE, or IRE of the subjunctive, it's called the imperfect subjunctive. And just like the regular imperfect, with which would be a BA, the imperfect indicative, is going to be translated was or you could even just translate it as a regular past, just like a regular ED form, depending on the situation that we'll see maybe next stage a little bit more. But for example, exiret, all right, we have an IRE before an ending. It means he was exiting, or as I said, eventually it could also mean he exited. Comprehenderent, all right, we have the ERE before an ending, means they were arresting or they arrested, ED. And so, just like I said with the pluperfect subjunctive happening before another action, the imperfect subjunctive happens at the same time as the other action in the sentence. So compare this to our present participles. Remember, present participles happen at the same time as the other action in the sentence. Imperfect subjunctive happens at the same time. Again, perfect participles happen before the other action in the sentence, just like the pluperfect subjunctive that we saw in the last video would happen before the other action in the sentence. Just another note too, maybe this will help you too. Instead of thinking of it as ARE, ERE, or IRE, you could also think of it as the infinitive form. So we know since stage 13, ARE, ERE, and IRE are the endings that would have infinitive. So for example, exire with no ending on it would be to exit. Comprehendere with no NT on it would be to arrest. But now when you put an ending on that infinitive, it makes it an imperfect subjunctive, was or were, or ED. So circumstantial clauses can also apply to imperfect subjunctive verbs. So with the imperfect subjunctive, the Latin word cum usually means when. We saw that exact same bullet point in the other video. And so again, cum can still mean with, but when you have one of those subjunctive verbs, the ISSE verbs, or now the ARE, ERE, or IRE forms, cum can mean when. If you don't have those things, ISSE, ARE, ERE, or IRE, then cum has to mean with for our purposes. So for example, cum contenderent. So just like we did with the pluperfect subjunctive, all right, cum is going to mean when, and now the ERE is were and ing, like a regular imperfect tense with a BA. So when Quintus and Dumnorix were crossing is the translation here. Cum, and then cogitaret. So we have cum plus a subjunctive form, now an ARE. Imperfect subjunctive is when Salvius was considering the matter. Just compare this to the pluperfect subjunctive with an ISSE. If this were cogitaviset, it would be when Salvius had considered the matter. That means that the considering happened before the other action in the sentence. Here, with an ARE and then an ending, an imperfect subjunctive, he's considering the matter while something else is happening. It happens at the same time. So again, this construction shows the circumstances under which another action happens. These actions are happening at the same time. So this first example here, when Quintus and Dumnorix were crossing the bridge, they encountered Salvius's men, for example. If they hadn't been crossing the bridge at that time, then they wouldn't have been in the circumstance in which they would have encountered Salvius's men. So I hope I got this idea of circumstance across and the subjunctive in general, but at the very least, cum with ISSE is when, ... had. Cum with ARE, ERE, or IRE before an ending on a Latin verb is when ... was doing something. We'll practice this a ton, even if you're still a little confused on it, that's okay. We're going to talk about this quite a bit throughout stage 24 and beyond.